वरधरं विष्णुं शशिवर्णं चतुर्भुजं प्रसन्नवदनं ध्यायेत् सर्वविघ्नोपशान्तये। ॐ सिन्दूरारुणविग्रहां त्रिनयनां माणिक्यमौलिस्फुरत्तारानायकशेखरां स्मितमुखी मापीनवक्षोरुहां पाणिभ्यां मलिपूर्णरत्नचषकं रक्तोत्पलं बिभ्रतीं सौम्यां रत्नघटस्थरक्तचरणां ध्यायेत् परामम्बिकाम्। ॐ ध्यायेन्नित्यं महेशं रजतगिरिनिभं चारुचन्द्रावतंसं रत्नाकल्पोज्ज्वलाङ्गं परशुमृगवराभीतिहस्तं प्रसन्नं पद्मासीनं समन्तात् स्तुतममरगणैः व्याघ्रकृतिं वसानं विश्वाद्यं विश्वबीजं निखिलभयहरं पञ्चवक्त्रं त्रिनेत्रम्। ॐ नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत्। ॐ गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रुतिस्मृतिपुराणानाम् आलयं करुणालयं नमामि भगवत्पादं शङ्करं लोकशङ्करम्। ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यं करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। सर्वोपनिषदो गावो दोग्धा गोपालनन्दनः पार्थो वत्ससुधीर्भोक्ता दुग्धं गीतामृतं महत्।
धृतराष्ट्र उवाच धर्मक्षेत्रे कुरुक्षेत्रे ममवेतायुयुत्सवः मामकाः पाण्डवाश्चैव किं कुर्वत सञ्जय। श्रीभगवानुवाच क्लैब्यं मास्मगमः पार्थ नैतत्त्वयुपपद्यते क्षुद्रं हृदय दौर्बल्यं त्यक्तोत्तिष्ठ परन्तप। कर्मणैव हि संसिद्धि आस्थिता जनकादयः लोकसङ्ग्रहमेवापि सम्पश्यन् कर्तुमर्हसि। प्रकृतिः क्रियमाणानि गुणैः कर्माणि सर्वशः अहङ्कारविमूढात्मा कर्ताहम् इति मन्यते। इन्द्रियस्यार्थे रागद्वेषौ व्यवस्थितौ तयोर्न वशमागच्छेतौ यस्य परिपन्थिनौ। अर्जुन उवाच अथ केन प्रयुक्तोऽयं पापं चरति पूरुषः अन्यच्छन्नपि वार्ष्णेय बलादेव नियोजितः। श्रीभगवानुवाच काम एष क्रोध एष रजोगुणसमुद्भवः महाशनो महापाप्मा विद्धेनम् इह वैरिणम्। धूमेनाव्रियते वह्नि यथा दर्शो मलेन च यथोल्बेनावृतो गर्भः तथा तेनेदमावृतम् तस्मात् त्वम् इन्द्रियाण्यादौ नियम्य भरतर्षभ पाप्मानं प्रजहीयेनं ज्ञानविज्ञाननाशनम् इन्द्रियाणि पराण्याहुः इन्द्रियेभ्यः परं मनः मनसस्तु परा बुद्धिः यो बुद्धेः परतस्तु सः एवं बुद्धेः परं बुद्ध्वा संस्तभ्यात्मानमात्मना जहि शत्रुं महाबाहो कामरूपं दुरासदम्.
Very nice. Actually, listening to this, recitation itself is so wonderful, with the meaning understood. Acha, so where are we, Pranav? It's about to start Shashtadhyay.
Ji sir.
Very good. So Shashtadhyay is called Yoga of Meditation, and it is one of my favorite chapters. All the chapters are good, but some are, we all have, as human beings, favorites. So we will read this, and then I'll try to give some analogies that may be useful. Acha, so what is Shashtodhyaya, chapter 6, Yoga of Meditation? So Bhagavan Sri Shankaracharya's lead in to this. Atita Anantara Adhyayante Dhyana Yogasya Samyak Darshanam Prati Antarangasya Sutra Bhutaha Shlokaha Sparshan Kritva Bahihi 5:27 to 29 Ityadaya Upadishtaha. At the end of the preceding chapter, Atita, one that went by, at the end of several adhyayas, Dhyana Yogasya Samyak Darshanam. The Samyak Darshanam is right perception of the Dhyana Yoga, the innermost Sutra Bhuta, the basic aphorisms, Shlokaha. What are those? 5:27 to 5:29. So starting right. Sparshan Kritva Bahirbahyan Chakshus-chaiva Antares Bhruvoho Pranapanau Samau Kritva Nasa Abhyantara Charinau Yatendriyam Mano Buddhir Munir Moksha Parayanaha Vigatecha Bhayak Krodho Yah Sada Mukta Eva Saha. So Bhagavan has given the prelude, how to attain this Samyak Darshan, the right perception. So what is the wrong perception? Anyone want to venture?
Everything else other than that.
Pardon me?
Everything else other than that.
This is a very clever answer, Resi. But surely you can amplify on it. Anyone care to amplify on it?
So one, like, not related to these shlokas, but in general, the wrong perception the Gita is addressing again and again is that misidentification of self, wrong identification of self. But I could not relate in these 2-3 shlokas, but otherwise that is throughout, that is the underlying theme.
So
Other-
seeing many where there is one, right? So anytime we perceive, we see many, right? You don't see the same thing again and again, do you? Right? But that is not the perception of the Muni to whom Bhagavan Sri Krishna points, right? So when we perceive, we say, I am sitting in a room. This room has 4 walls. There is a window. There are trees outside. There is birds chirping, children screaming. There is a computer in front of me. There are 10 people on the other side of the computer whose images are showing. This is the world of phenomenon. Okay? Now, the ancient rishis, they analyzed perception at its most fundamental root. And they said, O child, what you perceive is nothing but name and form. Nama Rupa. You take a form in your mind, you associate a name with it, and you call this perception. Everything that you have perceived falls under this categorization. If a form doesn't have a name, it does not sustain in the memory. That is why the word with the capital W, or what is called the logos by the Greeks, the kshara akshara that we call, without the alphabet, without the words, there is no world. Because if you don't associate the same word again and again with the form, it has no meaning. That's what happens in Alzheimer's. You know, the connection between the words and the form starts getting weaker. And so when the son or the wife or whatever relative comes into the room, the patient does not recognize, because the connection between the form and the word has broken. Nama Rupa has broken. Correct? When that Nama Rupa is broken through that bodily perception, the mind leaves. Its time inhabiting the Bhuloka has come to an end. Right? Now it will leave based on the last thought that was prevailing in it as it left the body. And the cycle will continue. If that last thought was through one of the 9 gates in the body, other than the Brahmarandra, it will go by the southern path and occupy another body to complete its cycle. The remaining vasanas will have to be played out. Right? However, the glory and the blessing of human birth is that within this experience is afforded the chance to release from that cyclical birth and death cycle and to become one with the Supreme. That is why human birth is so precious. It is not actually exactly pleasant. When the body is young, the human birth seems pleasant, because when the body is nicely well controlled and it is young, you can enjoy through the senses. We can taste, we can eat lots of good food, stomach will still digest, we can smell flowers, we can go on long walks, there is no sense of exhaustion, and there's great delight. But if at that time the body was well controlled and the mind was trained, it would have learned to enjoy the body sensibly. But if the body is not sensibly enjoyed, then towards the end of life, in any case, it is beset by pain. Right? It's a fact. There is no value judgment in this. It is neither good nor bad. It's just a fact. Right? We have never seen anyone in the body who is very old jumping up and down for joy. Right? It's not possible. It's simply a fact. Right? So everybody is going to go, everybody, also everybody is going to go through this cycle. Correct? So now, if we know that by Monday, there is a project due in my work. My boss is going to ask me, what did you do on this project? I have two choices. I can wait till Sunday night and try to prepare the project, in which case it will be very stressful and I will be under a lot of tension. Or I can start preparing on the project tonight itself. Correct? Right? So what is beautiful among the young people, particularly younger you are in this group, that's why I give more congratulations and credit. Because if at such a young age you can already start seeing the importance of this, you're truly blessed, right? Because this particular exam, everybody has to take. Nobody can escape this exam. Other exams we can escape. We may get PNP in some course this time because of COVID-19 pandemic. But this exam, there is no escaping, right? God will give the exam whether there's pandemic or not, right? So now, we have so far digressed a bit and talked about the perception of Namarup, right? So if I can take every perception and boil it down to this Namarup, and I realize that this perception is fundamentally unstable because at some point it's going to dissolve, right? So then the Rishi said, well, then how should we, if this many is not true, then what is true? Right? If that is a false perception, then what is a true perception? So then they said, okay, well, you know, this perception of form itself has 5 characteristics. So how do we know things in the phenomenal world? We can either smell them, we can taste them, we can see them, we can touch them, or we can hear them, right? I told you birds are chirping. So what is a bird? A bird has a shape, so I can see the shape. I can hear its sound. 2 characteristics. Children are screaming. Children, there's a shape for the child. I see the shape. From there emanates a sound. Children are screaming, correct? Does it obey the test? As an interesting exercise, you can try and find some phenomenon in the world that doesn't obey the test. Good exercise. Try it. I encourage you to try it. Okay. Because you must convince yourself that in fact, like in linear algebra, you know, the 5 senses are a basis. That means any vector within the realm of the phenomenal world is spanned by this basis. You understand this? You guys who do linear algebra will understand spanning basis, right? Correct? There is no vector in the phenomenal world that cannot be reached by this 5 senses. Doesn't exist. Okay. So good. So we reduced infinity, many, to 5. Right? But are those 5 everything that we perceive? So then we look further and we say beyond the senses, right? There is a sense of I beyond the body. Okay. Even if I don't identify with the body, there is a sense of I. Because otherwise, what happens in deep sleep? In sleep, I go to sleep, but I'm not really conscious of my body. Right? In dreams, we have a sense of I. Right? We see things from a vantage point of an I. And so the Rishi said, well, child, you have done well to reduce multiplicity to 5. Let me teach you another trick. This 5 is actually composed of 3. Okay? And these are the 3 gunas. So they analyzed the perception and said, these jnanendriyas that you have, they interact with the objects, Vishaya, in the world, and they generate this perception in your mind. And these are all composed of the 3 gunas. And there is a very beautiful treatise by Bhagavan Sri Adi Shankaracharya, none less than him, called Panchikaranam, in which he talks about this quintuplication. How did the 5 come about from the 3? Nevertheless, then the question is, okay, there are these 3. What are these 3? Sattva, Rajas, Tamas. They are the gunas of Prakriti, of Shakti, Devi. She, the one, her very nature is the 3. Right? So now, she is the dynamic aspect of Shiva. Who is the auspicious one? The static aspect of this. So those two are nothing but like two sides of the same coin. So we don't say, oh, we don't look at a coin and say this is a heads coin or this is a tail coin. Do you say that? You say a coin is a coin, right? Do you distinguish? Today I'm going to give you a heads coin. No. Similarly, Shiva and Shakti, you cannot distinguish. They're two sides of the same coin, right? And when that delightful experience of their unity is perceived directly in the mind, that is the pathway to the right perception, right? Once that direct experience of their unity underlying all this multiplicity is known, that is Samyak Darshana. That is the door, that's the gateway to Samyak Darshana. Then that Samyak Darshana has to become permanently established. Not just once seeing it, but it has to become a permanent state. So this is what Bhagavan is talking about. So this right perception is seeing the one in the many. Right? Another way to approach. In the Upanishads, which is one of the Prasthanatrayi for Advaita Vedanta, as is the Bhagavad Gita, there are Mahavakyas. The Mahavakyas tell you the same thing. Listed as 7, but usually the order is not given. The order is very important. The first Mahavakya is Brahman Satyam Jagan Mithya. The world is false, Brahman is real. What does this mean? It is not saying that you do not perceive the world. Yes, you perceive the world. But that multiplicity, which seems opposed to unity, is false. Right? So then what is this Brahman? That is the question that the aspirant should have. Very well, sir. You have told me that the world is false. Then what is the truth? What is Brahman? That is called Brahma Jigyasa. Athato Brahma Jigyasa. That is the first verse of the Brahma Sutra. And therefore, and now, this desire to know Brahman. So this is a very unique desire. It's not like an ordinary desire. It's a very special desire, right? It is not common. And it is very rarely found to such a great intensity that in the human life, it is successful. Right? But nevertheless, it's a very important step because it is the first step in the preparation for the final exam. Right? So only if the student knows what is the material can they start studying. If you don't even know what the material is, final exam comes, the mind starts to leave the body, right? Then there is still hope. Bhagavan has said, if you just take my name at the Prayana Kal, then also I'll save you, right? This is why the Lord is called infinitely merciful, right? There is the famous story of Ajamila, who, although living the life contrary to the preparatory exam, had a son called Narayana. At the end, he said, "Oh Narayana," and the power of the Lord's name is so great that at that instant, he, while destined for the southern path, was given a chance to at least work on himself to take the northern path. Right? This is why the name of the Lord, I told you name and form, that one name, Sri Ram, these names can save. They have the power to save. Or any of the great mantras, Panchakshari, Om Namah Shivaya, Dwadashakshari, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Right? These have the power to save. Their power is so great that even the complete idiot who chants without knowing anything, right? That vibration it sets up in the mind, it slowly turns the mind towards the right path. So this is a great power. But now Bhagavan is saying that let me give you the description of how does one take the many and learn there is one, because you must know this on your own, right? So he says, now is commenced the chapter, Tesham Vritti Sthaniyaha Ayam Shashto Adhyaya Arabhyate. Now is commenced the chapter that forms a gloss on them, on those basic aphorisms. Why should someone keep out external contacts? Sparshan Kritva Bahirbahyan, fixing the eye between the eyebrows. Chakshuscha eva antare bhruvoho. Pranapanau. What is this prana? What is this apana? Samau kritva, making them equal. Nasabhyantara charinau. And the ones that move within the nostrils. Yatendriya, controlling the senses. Mana and the mind. Buddhihi and the intellect. What are these? What is the senses? What is this mind? What is the intellect? How can I know them directly within myself? Moksha parayana, intent on liberation. Vigata, free from ichha, desire. Bhaya, fear. Krodha, wrath. Yaha, that Muni. The Muni was in the second pada. Muni moksha parayana. Sada mukta evasaha, is eternally emancipated. Indeed. So now you see, one interesting thing about the Bhagavad Gita is it has 18 chapters, but it's kind of a compendium of techniques. It's like Encyclopedia Britannica for liberation, right? But you go and read the Encyclopedia Britannica, but it's not an in-depth study of any of them. Do you understand what I mean, right? It's an encyclopedia, right? By definition, an encyclopedia is a compendium. It's not going to give you all the details. So although this Shashtadhyaya is very important, the purpose of this Gita is to turn the mind towards deeper study of one of these. So the proper place to understand Dhyana Yoga, and again Sri Bhagavan Sri Shankaracharya has pointed this out in his Upadesha Sahasri, is that in order to prepare the mind for this, one must master the Yoga Sutra. In that are given the complete details of Dhyana Yoga. But before one prepares to master the Yoga Sutra, Patanjali Ashtanga Yoga is recommended the Hatha Yoga, Hatha Yoga Pradipika, Swatmarama, right? So again, in terms of preparing for the final exam, this is a sequence given. But nevertheless, there is also a certain age appropriateness for some of these things. For instance, Hatha Yoga is difficult to practice in great intensity at a certain age, right? But nevertheless, the Ashtanga Yoga can be practiced, right? And definitely japa, mantra japa can be practiced at any age. Even lying in bed, one can practice mantra japa, right? And that has its own value, great value, correct? So this is the reason. Now, there is some objections and others, which we will go forward. Since the preliminary accessory of the yoga of meditation is work, till one becomes fit to embark on meditation, the eligible householder must do work. So it is commended in verse 6.1. So again, Bhagavan is making this understanding and distinction. Sri Bhagavan uvacha anashritah karma phalam karyam karma karoti yaha sa sannyasi cha yogi cha na niragnir na cha akriyah anashritah karma phalam karyam karma karoti yaha. Not being dependent on the fruit of the action, the one who does the work that has to be done. Sa sannyasi, he is a renouncer of works. He is also a yogi, not one who does not have the Agni or the one without work or a non-worker, not depending on the fruits of action. Whoever performs the work that has to be done, karyam, he is the renouncer and the yogi, not one who has rejected the household fires and not. No. Karyam here means Veda Anushtita Karyam. Those karyas that are prescribed. We talked about the different kinds of karma, right? Nitya karma, Naimittika karma, Kamya karma, Nishiddha karma, correct? Nishiddha, of course, not to be done. First three, Nitya, daily, Naimittika, coming on certain occasion, Kamya, impelled by some desire, dharmic desires, correct? So those are the works that Bhagavan is saying should be performed. When he's saying now this household fire, he is referring to the Agnihotram and Avapasana for Brahmacharis, Samvidadhanam. These are recommended Nitya Karmas. Now, Bhagavan is elevating it. He's saying he is the one, is a sannyasi, he is a yogi, not the one who has rejected those fires or the works. Right? Now, this Agni has a twofold meaning. Right? Now, in the physical plane, definitely there is an Agni. It is kindled when we do a homam. And in that is offered ghee and the samid. And the samid are representative of our samskaras, actually, in the Viraj home. Right? Now, at the same time, this Agni is representative of an Agni within us. In the Manipuraka Chakra resides an Agni. And in this Agni are given all the ahutis from the senses. This Agni processes that. This Agni has two directions. One is called Jata Veda and the other is Kravyadam Agni. The Kravyadam Agni leads the mind downward. So when we offer the objects of senses into this Agni, it can take us into a lower path, into the lower worlds, like Patal, the hellish worlds. Or it can take us through Jata Veda to the higher worlds, to the world of the law of the gods, to Swarga. So whenever we offer in the fire, we invoke Jata Veda, not Kravyadam Agni. Right? We invoke the fire that will take the offerings up towards the realm of the gods, Swarga. Because then when they are satisfied, and when we as Yajaman, we eat the Yajna Shishta, that which is remaining after the Yajna is done, the remainder, right? Then that is our greatest performance in the Bhulok. That is the correct performance in the Bhulok. So now, second verse. Yam sannyasam iti prahur yogam tam vidhi pandava nahi asanyasta asankalpo yogi bhavati kaschana. So earlier, Bhagavan said when he was talking about yoga, he was talking about karma yoga. Right? So again, now in the same sense, he uses the word yoga. He says, Yam sannyasam iti prahu, that which was mentioned to you as renunciation. Pra-ahuhu, earlier was mentioned. Tam vidhi, tam yogam vidhi, know that to be yoga, O Pandava, prince. Nahi, not verily, asanyasta, the one who has not discarded these mental, asankalpo, right? The one who has not discarded mental constructions, yogi bhavati kaschana. Without those, one cannot become a yogi. So, nahi yasmat asanyasta sankalpaha asanyastah अपरित्यक्तः फलविषयः संकल्पः अभिसन्धिः येन सह असन्यस्तसंकल्पः कश्चन कश्चिदपि कर्मी योगी समाधानवान् भवति न संभवति इत्यर्थः. So Bhagavan says, he says there is a similarity between real renunciation and karma yoga in respect of the agent. The real renouncer discards craving, the cause of activity and mental constructions as regards works and their fruits. These at the back of all works he has discarded. The karma yogi too, while performing works, gives up mental constructions as regards their fruits. So in this sense, without the discarding of mental constructions and attachment to the fruits of activity, one cannot become a yogi or a concentrated human being. This is the idea. So then this is a very famous and beautiful verse. Arurukshor munir yogam karmakarana muchyate yoga rudhasya tasyaiva shamakarana muchyate. Arurukshor, the one who is desirous of scaling the peak of yoga, muni, yogam, for him, karma, work is said to be the cause. As regards the one who has scaled it, yoga rudhasya tasyaiva shama karanam uchyate. So this is very powerful and important, which is this decision. When he says niragni, this Bhagavan can tell somebody. It is not for us to judge and go around telling people you must keep your agni. This is a personal evaluation you have to do of yourself. In what way am I keeping my agni and my kriyas? By applying number 3, which is, has one scaled the peak of yoga or not? Or is one still trying to scale? Based on this evaluation, one can apply this rule to oneself. Right? So this is number 3 is a litmus test one can apply to oneself. Then Bhagavan says, number 4. Yada, so now question will arise, how can I decide whether one is yoga rudha or I am only aruruksho, right? So for that, Bhagavan gives the litmus test. He says, litmus test is number 4. Yada hina indriyartheshu na karmasu anushajyate sarva sankalpa sannyasi yoga rudhas tadochyate. When the sage is no longer attached to sense objects and works, indriyartheshu na karmasu anushajyate sarva sankalpa sannyasi, discards all mental constructions, then he is said to have scaled the peak of yoga. Manusmriti is quoted here. See, Sankalpa Mulaha Kamo Vai Yajnaha Sankalpa Sambhavaha. Manusmriti 2:3. Desire is rooted in mental constructions. Kamaha Sankalpa Mulaha. Desire is rooted in Sankalpas. Vai, verily, Yajnaha, sacrifices, Sankalpa Sambhavaha, are born of mental constructions. Kama janami te moolam sankalpat kila jayase natvam sankalpayishyami samulo na bhavishyasi. This is very powerful. Desire, in this Shanti Parvan, the Kam itself is being addressed directly. O desire, janami te moolam, I know your root. Sankalpat kila jayase, you are born of mental constructions. Natvam sankalpayishyami, I will not set you up mentally, then you will have no root to support you. Sammulo na bhavishyasi. Right? So this is why right from the beginning, this importance to thought control is given. Right? Even as parents, when they encounter children, if they say something negative, they'll say, don't think like that, right? because once the wrong thinking takes root, it's very difficult to remove it at the root, right? And then the process of yoga is needed to remove this sankalpa itself. Acha, now what does Bhagavan say in verse 5? Uddharedatmana atmanam natmanam avasadayet atmaiva hyatmano bandhuhu atmaiva ripuratmanah. So all these 3, 4 and 5 are really worth beautiful, are very beautiful and worth memorizing. Uddharet iti. One must elevate. What must one elevate? Atmana. In the instrumental case, by the self, one must elevate what? The self. Atmanam. Na atmanam. Not avasadiyet, denigrate or weaken the self. That is, the self should not be denigrated or weakened. Atma eva. The self verily, he, atmanaha, bandhu, is the friend of the self. Atma eva, atma eva is atma eva. The self verily is the enemy of the self. So this can be again very confusing, like a riddle, like a Zen koan. How is this possible? Because this word self is used, atma, in slightly different way. One is, in some case it refers to the mind. In some case it refers to the pure consciousness within, self with a capital S. So, Uddharet Atmana Atmanam. Which is the self that must be elevated? The supreme self cannot be elevated because it's everywhere, right? It's only the limited notion of self that must be elevated. That limited notion of self arose because of the ahankar. It arose in the mind, right? So that limited notion of self must be elevated by what? By the true indwelling supreme self. So first pada is Uddharet Atmana. Now the two selves are clear. In the first verse, the limited notion of self, which sees the many, it does not see the one, must be elevated by the supreme self. Uddharet Atmana Atman. Na Atmanam avasadiyet. One must not denigrate the self. And this is, again, can be understood in two ways. Obviously, one should not denigrate the supreme self. Such a person is an idiot. I already told you in the Isha Upanishad, it says, Asurya namatan lokan, andena tamasavrata. Those words are sunless. Don't go to those words. What are those words? Yete atmahanajana, the ones who kill the self. How do you kill the supreme self? By denying its existence. Denying its existence within you, denying the Lord, and denying the supreme power, denying Brahman, denying Shakti, denying Shiva. Right? As long as one does not do that, you are not denigrating the supreme self. There are people who do that too, right? Best to shun that company while one is trying to improve the limited self. But even while not denigrating the supreme self, one may denigrate the limited self. So negative thinking. One can say, oh, I am an idiot. I will never succeed. What? Look at my life. Look at the family I was born in. Look at the place I've come to. Look at this world I live in. What is the hope? This is negative thinking. And Bhagavan clearly says, don't be an idiot and don't weaken the self. Right? This is not the same as being egotistical. To be confident should not be confused with egotism. Similarly, weakness should not be confused with humility. There is no need for false humility. There is no need for false modesty, right? The humility that comes should be pure and true humility, right? Tomorrow, if I can lift 200 pounds of weight, there's nothing wrong in my saying I can lift 200 pounds. It's a fact. It's not an egotistical statement. I can do it, right? And in my heart, I know I do it because of the power of the Lord, right? But if tomorrow I start behaving like I'm some crawling worm on the street, right? This is not good for me. and it's not good for the people around me. It's not good for my family. It's not good for society. It is an adharma, right? Human being, these motivational speakers and other coaches say correctly, is 99% potential, untapped. What we have tapped is only 1%. We've not actually tapped the full power inside us, right? But if a person goes and says that to somebody else, they will not believe it easily, right? Worse still, if they say that even what you see of me is only 1%, they will not believe it even more, right? Yeah, but that's the nature of the thinking. Anyway, the main point is don't engage in negative self-talk. This is very, very debilitating. One should immediately stop when the negative self-talk comes, right? Next point, Atma eva hyatmana bandhu. The self is the friend of the self. So what does that mean? The supreme self is truly the friend of the limited self, right? Atma eva ripuratmana. Who is the enemy? The limitation, upadhi. The limited self is the enemy of the self, right? This is a very powerful verse. In sense of, see, the Bhagavad Gita is so beautiful. It tells us what is a wise and sensible self-image, right? And what is the root of that self-image? Be ready to bow your head to God, but don't stupidly bow your head to anyone and everyone you see. Yes, they are all representations of God, right? But you must exercise your discrimination. This is what Bhagavad Gita teaches. You don't have to be prideful, but you must have a good sense of, and in the old days, this was rules, whom you should do namaskaram to, who should do namaskar to whom, where you should do, when you should do, right? They were well codified rules, right? Everyone's station in life was clearly defined, and there it was very easy. Nowadays, people have forgotten these things, right? And so there is no clarity, right? So we must now rediscover that clarity, right? Yeah. So anyway, self-image. Next one. Bandhuratma atmanastasya yenatmaiva atmanajitah anatmanastu shatrutve vartet atmaiva shatruvat. So bandhuhu atma atmanah tasya. So the self is the friend of that self by which the self has been subdued. Meaning that jiva whose sense organs have been controlled, to that person, the supreme self is a friend. Bandhuhu. So friend. Atma. Which one? The supreme self. Of whom? Of which atmana? That one. Yena atmaiva atmana jitah. By whom the sense organs have been conquered. The mind has been conquered. Anatmanaha to shatrutve. But the one who has not conquered, unsubdued, the supreme self acts like a foe. So we can see this even, in very simple example, which is sometimes we may get very disturbed by something that happens in the world, right? And when we get disturbed, then the mind can get angry, right? Then somebody sometimes can come and give us wise advice, like, listen, so such and such course of action is best for you. But if the mind is not controlled, then we can even ignore that good advice. So we don't know who our friends are sometimes, right? And then it seems that the world is torturing us, right? But if the mind is practice of pranayama and other things are done, then slowly one can see clearly, okay, where is the truth, where is the true friends, where is the good advice coming from? And then that transforms. So that is what is meant by Shatruvat. Otherwise, the world itself seems like an enemy. So anyway, we have covered up till verse 6 of chapter 6. And we have about 7 minutes. So, a friend of mine, very good friend from Chennai, he and a very pious and exemplary person, asked, I'd like some advice on meditation. How should I do meditation? I'm already doing Sandhya Vandanam, but the mind wanders at the time of Gayatri Japa. Right? So how can one simply explain meditation? So I'll give you 2 or 3 analogies and you see how it helps you. First one is, have you all played this game as a child of taking a magnifying glass and you take a paper, you go out on a sunny day and you place the magnifying glass at the right focal point, you can focus a dot of solar energy on that paper. And if you hold it for long enough, what will happen?
Paper burns.
You can burn the paper. You can burn a hole through the paper, right? Correct? Okay. This is meditation, right? So what is meditation? So what is this analogy? The magnifying glass is your mind. Okay. The sun is the supreme self within you, right? So if you don't deny the supreme self, it's there within you, right? The mind is the glass and the paper,
It's the limited self.
it can be interpreted in different ways in the analogy. One is you can take it as the world itself, right? Or we can take it as ignorance, which is also correct word for limited self, right? Right. So when the mind is concentrated, it can burn like a laser through the false perception of many and see the one. This is meditation, right? Plain and simple. Now I give you another analogy. How many of you like to cook or have to cook? I see a lot of hands raised. Very nice. Yeah. So in cooking, one of the basic things we have to do is we take a pot and we put it on the fire, right? Pot or a pan. Say you're going to boil some water for rice. So you have to put the pot. Now, one way to think of it is the water in the pot is your mind. Okay. The side walls of the pot are your pranas. Okay. And sense objects, senses. The base of the pot is your ignorance. Okay. And the heat that is being supplied to the pot is the world. Okay. Now, as we experience the world, the heat that heat supplied to the base is increasing, right? Then as we grow older, this heat becomes quite unbearable sometimes, right? We may have some very negative experience and we may feel like this world is really terrible, it's unbearable, right? So then what happens to the mind, right? Suppose by grace of past samskaras and lives, the mind has some tuning to the guru or to the spiritual paths, okay? That is a nucleation site on the base of the pot. What happens at a nucleation site when you increase the heat a lot? What happens when you increase the heat on a pot of water? a small bubble forms first. And the bubble moves up, right? So the nucleation site is that openness to Guru, to the spiritual path. When the heat of the world increases, the mind generates a bubble taking it up. It says, maybe I should do some dhyana. Maybe I should do some part. Maybe I should do some mantra japa. Right? So it goes through the mind. Right? Now, as you start increasing that heat, it starts using the heat inside the mind, the water, and vaporizing it. Right? If you keep on doing that, eventually the mind gets cleared. Right? And the bottom of the pan will be melted off, blasted off. Right? Then there is no difference between the world and the supreme. Right? So what is causing the agitation in the mind is the pranas and the senses. These are kind of your walls, right? If you're able to keep the walls of the pot strong and hold the water inside, and then channel that heat from the world that you're getting in the right direction, then it's meditation, right? But if we don't ever think about this nucleation site, then the base of the pan is very thick, very ignorant, highly thick. It doesn't matter. The world keeps giving you heat, the mind keeps moving around, and nothing happens, right? There's just agitation. Right? What do you say? So these are two simple analogies to give you this idea of meditation, right? So any questions or comments?
It seemed in the beginning, it seemed like it was easy to ignore that one bubble rising up.
Mm-hmm.
That's the most important thing, getting the right direction.
Right. Indeed.
Dr. Shankar, I have a small question.
Sure.
So Sri Krishna is using the same word, Atman,
Mm-hmm.
like the different forms, for both the limited self and the supreme self.
Mm-hmm.
So is he deliberately leaving it for interpretation?
Absolutely. Right. Right.
Because while reading some of the shlokas, it becomes sometimes confusing whether to understand the word Atman as the self or as the supreme self. So, it sometimes it becomes difficult to see
It can be. But that is where the practice of meditation is helpful.
Okay.
Because then it gives a clarity, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is meant.
The verse 6:5
Mm-hmm.
was the first verse you introduced to me, and I like that verse, so thank you.
Oh, wonderful, Chetas. Thank you. You have a good memory. Yes, I remember. Excellent memory. Good.
Not many questions today, sir, because this, like, I think lot of topics got covered today.
Mm-hmm.
Although only we just covered 6 shlokas, but right from that idea of perception and then Mahavakyas and all. So it was
Right.
insightful.
So a good place to start is in the notion of meditation is this mental agitation, like I said, right? So mental agitation, I told you, is connected to the pranas. If the prana is agitated, the mind will be agitated, right? And the trick to the control of prana is the breath control, right? So that is where Hatha Yoga comes in. That by controlling the breath, one can control the mind. So same thing for, if you listen to the Veda Parayan, the Veda Parayan has a swara and it has a length of syllables, right? Hrasva, Dirgha, Pluta, etc. How long should one hold the syllable? This is very important. It's a science, right? When the speech and the flow of energy are controlled according to that Veda Parayan, according to the rules of Chandas, right? Then it is a pranayam, actually. Okay? Chanting it is a pranayam, listening to it is also a pranayam. Right? And then slowly it sets up these mental vibrations that tune Udana, upward. Right?
Sorry, which tune are you talking about? Listening to what? Listening to what?
Veda Parayan, which means the chanting of the Vedas. That is why it is given so much importance. And it is said that the Ved is the prana of the Lord. And in meditation, it will become clear how is it that Brahma gave all of mankind this Ved, right? How through his breath came the Vedas. And then how did Veda Vyas then? Because recognizing that the human life is becoming shorter and shorter as we go on, were then divided into 4 because one human could not, like in the old days, know all of it. So they divided it. And then that led to our current 4-fold classification of Veda, right? But its fundamental root is in a vibration, and it's a pranayam, right? And that is why if you go and listen to some elders who have known the chanting of the Ved, they place very great importance on both pronunciation and the proper ucharan, right? Without that, its power is lost. That shabda balam, the mantra balam will not be there. We have those words, right? Shabda balam. Doesn't mean loud sound. It doesn't just mean like increase the decibel, no. Or mantra balam, right? When it is invoked with the right attitude, with the right training, with the right intention, it has its force, it has its power, right? So those must be acknowledged, respected, and understood. So slowly then we gain an appreciation for why the rishis gave all that for humanity, right? Very good. Any other questions, or shall we now conclude?
Dr. Sankar, I have one question.
Yes, please.
So how are the five sense characters composed of three gunas? How can you relate gunas to senses?
So this is properly actually described in Panchikaranam, but I'll give you a quick summary, if it were, as it were. So perception happens when the senses contact the objects, right? So remember, he says, "Ye hi samsparshaja bhoga." The word sparsha, touch, right? Touch. Something touches something, right? It's only when the senses are turned outwards that you can touch something in the world outside, outwards from the body, right? Now, the objects of the senses are predominantly tamasic in nature. Okay, they are all composed. Everything is composed of the three gunas, but those objects are more tamasic proportionately. There is a fraction, there is a formula given in the Panchikaranam, how it is formed, right? And the Jnanendriyas have a higher proportion of sattva in them. But rather than taking my word for it, one should meditate on the Indriyas. That's the way to know them, right? So if one meditates on the sense of smell, on the sense of touch, it becomes clear what they are representing. And there is a practice called Bhuta Shuddhi, which you might have had chance to see on Swami Gyaneshwar Bharati's site, which is an accurate and powerful technique that he describes to know this, right? That is the fraction. And the karmendriyas have a higher proportion of rajas. So this is how the gunas divide themselves. And also, if you look at the various senses, starting from if you want to say sense of smell up to sense of sound, there is a variation in the proportion of the gunas. More tamasic are the smell and taste, progressively more rajasic are the sight and touch, and then more sattvic are the touch and smell, touch and hearing. So they are more subtle. Hearing is the most subtle. Okay, so those things you can read Panchikaranam also for details.
Thank you, Dr. Sankar.
Certainly. Acha. Any other comments, questions? Okay, if not, let us say Shanti Mantram, and then I will see you all next week. It's very nice you could all join. Is everyone doing well and staying sane in the midst of all this, right, lockdown? So very good. Om Tachamyora Vranimahe Gatum Yajnaya Gatum Yajnapataye Daivihi Swastirastunaham Swastirmanushebhyah Urdhvam Jigatu Bheshajam Shanno Astu Dvipadehe Sham Chatushpade. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.